I just want to start out by saying thank you to everybody for coming tonight. I appreciate you participating in this. Hopefully you will find it interesting, I would say entertaining, but the Petersons and I were just talking about how Paul and I are two of the least interesting people that you could be learning from, but that's okay. We'll see what we can do to keep your interest. The information is interesting, so hopefully that will the message will overlook the message givers. So a couple things I wanted to touch on as we get into this. First, a few introductions. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Toby Rainbow, teaching finance classes and providing financial counseling for about 15 years now. So we've been through a lot of classes and have seen and tried to help a lot of people as they work through how to be good stewards of their resources. We also have the Petersons, who Paul will be speaking here in a little bit on budgeting, so riveting topic. They've been helping out with the finance classes and financial counseling for several years now, and Paul is also the deacon that helps oversee and administer the care fund. So they've been just a great partner in all of this. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just jump into the class or the session. So hopefully you're in the right place. We're here tonight to talk about stewardship from a financial perspective. Ultimately, our goal in this life is to glorify God, and one of the most visible and practical ways that we do that is the way that we show our priorities and the way that we use our resources, both our time and our money. So this class addresses kind of the two main aspects that make that up. An accurate biblical perspective of stewardship, and then the practical knowledge to make that happen. So it's really important that you have both. The biblical perspective gives you the motivation. It's what motivates you to do the right things, make the right decisions. But then you also need practical knowledge to be able to make that happen. Without practical knowledge, motivation just turns into frustration, and knowledge without motivation just causes nothing to happen. So we want both of those things, and that's what we'll be working on, trying to instill that biblical perspective, but then also give you some of the tools to be able to make that happen. So almost all major financial mistakes occur because of either a lack of a right perspective and right motives, or a lack of information to be able to make good choices and execute on that. So we want to try to make sure that we address both of those. One thing I really wanted to note as we got started into this is that we recognize that everybody is coming from a different place, from both their finances and their time of life. We know that there are young people here who are just getting started, who still have a lot of major decisions ahead of you, and are still learning what it means to manage careers and finances. We also know that there are people here who are on the other end of the spectrum, who are in retirement, have been through most of the major financial decisions, and have gotten to a place where they're in a very different place. We recognize there are those that don't have a lot of resources to manage, and there are those that have more resources to manage. So we're attempting to provide information that will be helpful to everybody, and really we desire to motivate everybody towards stewardship. It is never too late, and there is nobody that can't improve or grow and mature in the way that they manage their resources. So hopefully we will find that. We also want to acknowledge that there is no single right way to do these things. Hopefully you'll find through the information that we present and that the Petersons present, we're trying to provide some principles, some kind of long-standing proven principles that should apply to everybody, and then also provide examples of things that we've done or that we've seen that have been successful, as well as some things that we've done that have not been successful, in order to help you be able to avoid some of the mistakes that we've made, and then consider some of the principles and some of the activities that we have found to be successful. But with the recognition that everybody's life circumstances, the context of where they're coming from is different. And so there is no absolutes when it comes to finances. There is nothing that is absolutely right or absolutely wrong. And so as we work through these things, hopefully you'll see that it's through a lens of trying to provide principles in order to help, but without those absolutes, because there aren't absolutes when it comes to these things. So we're gonna cover 3 main areas over these 3 Wednesday nights. Tonight is our strategy session. So we're gonna talk about stewardship. That's really kind of the foundational, fundamental basis on which we wanna build our hearts and the way that we approach finances. So we wanna make sure that we're understanding and coming from a biblical perspective as we look at our time and our money. And then we're gonna talk about budgets, because budgets are really, again, kind of the foundational way that you manage your money. So that is where you take the priorities that you have and what are important to you, the ways that you wanna glorify God, and you put those into practice. You plan it out and make sure that that you're using your resources and that they match up to the things that you find to be important, and that you put restrictions in place that help deal with some of the tendencies that we have, and make sure that your money and the way that you spend your money is an accurate reflection of who you want to be as a family and an individual, and that it's the way that you intentionally try to glorify God with your resources. So those are the 2 topics that we're gonna cover tonight. I'm gonna go through stewardship, and then then we'll have a little discussion time, and then Paul is gonna talk about budgets, and then we'll have another discussion time at the end. Before I jump into stewardship, I did just wanna mention that in the materials, I believe if you look at the back, we have some resources that we mention. I brought some of the books that we reference. I'll have them here if anybody wants to come look through some of them. I think there's only one that we don't have here tonight. But if you want to take a look at these books, we have found them all to be really valuable and beneficial. They provide not only really good practical advice when it comes to managing your finances, but they also provide some really great biblical philosophies and strategies for how to apply biblical principles in our resources. So the smallest and easiest read of these is called The Treasure Principle. It's by Randy Alcorn. It's kind of just a simple, straightforward book. It really tries to set the standard for how you think about material things and resources, and really tries to help you have a biblical perspective on that. Another book, also by Randy Alcorn, is called Money, Possessions, and Eternity. This is like that little Treasure Principle book, but about 15 times more information. So it's like the expanded version that just goes into a lot more detail. It's a really great book. It's not necessarily a simple read, but I know my wife and I have found it to be really influential when it comes to having a really good biblical, eternal perspective on resources. Another book, Money, Debt, and Finances by Jim Neuheiser. This came recommended to us. It's a really great book and a fairly easy read, but has a lot of really practical, both biblical, but also very practical information about finances and stewardship. And then the last one I was gonna show you is a book called Master Your Money by Ron Blue. Similar to the other, it has a lot of great biblical principles, but also has a lot of good practical approaches to finances. So we'll have these up here after the session if you wanna come take a look at them and see what they are. It's everything from a simple small read to a fairly significant read. So feel free to come take a look at those after the sessions. So next, I just wanted to mention that we're not going to be taking questions during the sessions. There's a lot of materials that we want to get through, so we're not going to be taking questions. That being said, we would like you to text any questions that come up during any of these sessions to the number that's on the screen. Hopefully you'll see that number is on every one of the slides, so it's in the bottom corner. So at any time, if a question pops up, feel free to text your question to that to that number. And then during the third session, we're going to take about half of the session to just do a Q&A and answer a lot of those questions that have come up, that have been texted in over the first few days. So please feel free to text those questions, and then we'll answer as many as we can at that last session. So with that, we're going to jump into the session. So stewardship is an important thing. As I mentioned, it's kind of where we start with this class, because it's really important to build that biblical foundational basis, because it shapes the motives that we have and the way we think about and approach our resources. So stewardship is about managing our resources, the resources that God has entrusted for us or to us, for his glory, and trying to do that in a way that's as effective as possible. The Oxford Dictionary defines stewardship as supervising or taking care of something. That's kind of a boring definition, but really I think the thing that makes stewardship so important is because it really is addressing the idea that you're managing something that doesn't belong to you. And that's a really important aspect of it. Sometimes when we hear, and we use that word a lot here at FBC, if you've been around for a while, you've probably heard us say the word stewardship, both from the pulpit and in discussions a lot. And a lot of times when people hear stewardship, they just think, oh, stewardship means I'm just being responsible with my resources. And that is true, but I think there's another aspect to it that's really important, and that is that being a steward really means that you are managing and taking care of something that doesn't belong to you. You're doing that for something else. So a couple of examples that I wanted to give to kind of help frame what that stewardship word means is to look at what a steward is. So historically, a couple of historical, and I use that word historical loosely, a couple of historical examples would be like in medieval times, so like the times of Braveheart. You had kings or dukes or lords that owned large areas of land. They would assign a steward to be responsible for certain sections or parts of that land. The steward didn't own the land. They didn't have any ownership or authority there, other than they were intended to manage the people, manage the economy, make sure people were paying their taxes, that if there were disagreements, those got settled. So they were really just managing things for the kings or the lords or the dukes who actually were the owners of that land. So that's an example. The other example that I wanted to give was for any of you out there that are Lord of the Rings fans. Any Lord of the Rings fans? So you have the Steward of Gondor, who is not everybody's favorite character. He's best known for the way that he eats tomatoes. But he was responsible for Gondor. He wasn't the ultimate authority in that he didn't own Gondor, but he was responsible to take care of it. He was supposed to take care of the people, to keep them safe, to manage all administratively everything that was going on in that land. And he was supposed to do that until the return of the king, because the king was the actual authority who owned the land, who had authority over all those things. So the Steward of Gondor was just there to take care of it until the king came back, because he was the ultimate authority there. So that's really where that steward comes from, that idea comes from, is somebody who is managing something for somebody else. They don't own it themselves, but they are taking care of it, trying to do the best that they can to be most effective with those resources until the rightful authority comes back, or in order to serve that authority. So that's really where we're coming from with our resources as believers. We know that everything that we have comes from God, that we don't own it. We're just managing it, taking care of it, and trying to use it to the best of our abilities in order to glorify God. In order to do that, we really need to have a long-term, eternal perspective where we're trying to use our resources for things that are going to have an eternal impact, not worldly things, not caught up in the things of this world, but we're trying to do things in a way that honor God, and making sure that we have a perspective, a biblical perspective, and that we're trying to serve and honor him in all that we do. So there's a few key principles around stewardship that I want to cover. First, I kind of mentioned is that God is the creator and owner of all things. So we know that. We see it in Deuteronomy, that to the Lord belongs the heavens and the earth and everything in it. So everything that exists was created by him, and he is the owner of it all. And so that's important to understand because it should shape the way that we view our resources when we acknowledge that while we are in possession of it now, we are not the ultimate owners of it. We should be using it for his glory because he ultimately is the one who owns it all. The second one is that we are entrusted to manage his resources for his glory. I kind of mentioned that, and that really leads into the next one, which is we're supposed to manage our resources for his glory because our purpose in this world is to glorify God. So all that we do is to glorify God. Whether we eat or drink, whatever we do is intended to glorify God. And that includes the way that we use our resources. Those are to be used and managed in a way that glorifies God. And then fourth, our financial decisions really display our priorities, what's important to us, and how trustworthy we are. We see that in this verse in Luke where it comments about if we can't be trusted with worldly wealth, which is much less important and much less valuable than eternal things, then why would we be trusted with true riches or the things that really matter, that are really important? So the way that we handle our resources are really important because it is a demonstration of how trustworthy we can be, and it's also a demonstration of what our priorities are, what's important to us, and how well we can align our decisions with biblical principles. So with that, we want to spend a little bit of time allowing you to have some discussion as a group. So would love to have you kind of circle around your tables. If you're with your small group, that would be great. If you're at a table without other people, try to sneak in with somebody else and find a group to discuss. But we'd really love to give you about 10 or 15 minutes to talk through a couple of these questions. So the first one is, what do you do or what can you do to encourage a biblical perspective of money in your household? So with that, we just want you to think about the way that you currently manage your money, manage your resources, and think about that. Is there something you do that really does encourage good stewardship and a biblical perspective? And if not, what things could you do in order to help see that happen? And then the second one is, how does affirming that God owns everything and that we are simply stewards change the way that we view and consume our resources? So just think about that and talk about that as a group, as if we really do believe that God owns everything and that we're just managing those resources for us, how should it or how does it change the way that we use our resources? So we'll go ahead and take about 10, 15 minutes now. If you could circle around your tables and just discuss these questions, and then we'll come back up and get started here in a little bit. Thank you.
We are ready for part 2. It's bright up here. Thanks, Toby, for getting us started. Like he said, my name is Paul Peterson. I am one of the deacons here. I help out with the Care Fund. My wife, Crystal, is over here. Raise your hand. And we have been here for pretty much the whole time been married, 24 years. Not quite as long as some of you, but longer than some of you others. So I am here to talk about budgeting. It's actually something that I enjoy. That might be kind of strange to some of you. But budgeting, also called a spending plan, we want to talk about why we want to have a budget. A budget is going to prevent inconsistency and inefficiency as we look specifically in regards to our money. A budget can be freeing. A lot of people think that a budget is just confining because it's giving you rules on how you're going to spend your money. It can actually be freeing. When Crystal and I were first married, if I was at work and she called me and said, hey, I went to Target and spent $300, it was okay because I knew, okay, there's $50 out of this category and $20 out of this category, and everything fit nicely, and it was a stress-free way for her to spend the money that she needed to run the household, and I didn't have to be stressed that she was spending money that we didn't have. How we plan ahead to use God's resources to glorify Him, that's what we want to focus on with our budget. Another opportunity that this budget gives us is opportunity to practice unity within our marriage. Who doesn't want more of that, right? Finances is, if you go through marriage counseling, finances is probably one of the top 5 areas that married people struggle with. And so by having a budget, working through that together, it gives you a chance to work through that budget, work through the finances, work through your goals of what we have for a budget and why we want to do that in a way that's going to glorify God. It allows you to set realistic goals and track progress towards meeting those goals. We talk about SMART goals with other areas of our life. So SMART, an acronym, is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. And all those are applicable to how we set our budget. And a budget helps fight natural desires for worldly pleasures by setting limits. Proverbs 25:28 says that a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. So the city, they needed those walls in the old days to protect them from their enemies. So if we think that budget protects us from our enemies, it protects us from temptation to spend whatever we want. It protects us from selfishness of just wanting to buy whatever I want instead of looking at your family as a whole. So some other ways that we want to set budgets in our life is using those SMART goals. If we're looking at fitness or nutrition, we can't just say, well, okay, it's January 1st, I want to get healthy. I want to work out more. Those are not good measurable goals. Maybe our goal is to run a 5K. If I want to be able to run a 5K, I need to build a plan, work up to that distance so that I can run that 5K so that I can meet my goal. If I am doing a building project, I like doing construction, I need to look at what are the materials that I'm going to need. What is the permit that I'm going to need? What is my budget? And we were just talking over here, I probably need to double my budget and double the time that I think it's going to take because I'm always over budget and over time. But we need to have a plan for what that's going to look like when we do that project. And setting our financial budget is going to do the same thing for us. It's going to allow us to save more, to give more, and maybe meet another goal like taking a family vacation or another goal that we might have like that. So how do we start? We want to have a zero-based budget. So all of our money that we are making and earning is assigned a certain category for how that's going out. So if we are bringing in $5,000 a month, then we need to have that $5,000 categorized so that it all fits nicely into our mortgage, our car payment, our grocery budget. And when we total up our income and our expenses, those two numbers are going to be equal. The Best way, if you haven't done a budget before, the best way to start this is by tracking your expenses for a few months. Crystal and I just actually sat down the other day with a woman who is in her 80s and is doing her first budget. So it's never too late to start your first budget. So when we are looking at tracking your expenses, we can do this from memory, but we're probably gonna miss some stuff. So it might be time to dig out your credit card statements, dig out your bank statements, dig out your Venmo statement or your Apple Pay. Everything, every vehicle that we use, whether that's cash, whether that's a credit card, however we spend that money, we wanna dig those out because we're probably gonna miss certain things. We wanna be specific in how we track those expenses. And we just want to write those down and make notes of what they are. And this is gonna take buy-in. If you're a single person, you're just relying on yourself. But if you are married, this is gonna take equal buy-in on both parts of this, both parties in that family. And as you go through and you track your expenses, it's gonna give you probably, or maybe your first glimpse into what your financial priorities are. And you might be surprised that what you think are your financial priorities don't really match how you're spending your money. So as you go through and track, we need to realistically and honestly analyze how we're spending our money. And how Crystal's spending money is gonna be different than how I'm spending money. But we put that together and that's gonna be the basis of what our budget is gonna look like. I'm kind of loosely following the slides here. Once we come up with what our actual spending looks like, we're gonna start to create some categories of how our spending might be broken up. And I'll cover that more in just a second here. But one thing we want to consider is what is gonna be the time frame for our budget? Are we gonna do it a week at a time, a month at a time? For us, with the budget that we do is a month at a time. A lot of our bills are paid monthly, so for that, it just kind of makes sense that we're gonna do, January is gonna be a budget, February is gonna be another budget. We might have money left over at the end of February because it's only 28 days as opposed to 31. But it might be based on how often you get paid at your job or what that income stream looks like. And it's like Toby said, there's no specific right way to do it. How we do it might be different than Toby and Jenny, might be different than each of you. With my job, I get paid every 2 weeks, so that's 26 pay periods in a year. And so every 6 months, I have an extra paycheck. So we need to be diligent about what we're gonna do with that extra paycheck. Maybe that's something that we're saving for. For a long time, it was something we would take that extra paycheck every 6 months and put that aside in a fund for a new vehicle. We wanna make sure though that as we get those kind of one-time funds that we're not using those for our ongoing expenses. So whether that extra check, it could be an extra check you get every 6 months. It could be a bonus that you get every year. With my job, I'm able to sell back my sick leave. If I have a healthy year and don't take much sick leave, I can sell back some of my sick leave at the end of the year and get a little bonus. So we are gonna operate our budget a little bit different than a city or a county or a federal budget might go, obviously. We don't want to be relying on those extra one-time bonuses or one-time checks to fund an ongoing monthly expense. One thing that I have never had to deal with is working on commission, where if you have a sales job, maybe you have a base salary and then you have a commission based on sales, maybe you're in real estate. I have never had to deal with that myself. But when we taught in the marriage class with Denny and Annie Myers years ago, Denny was on commission for most of his jobs. And he would have good months and he would have lean months. And he just had to plan where he knew conservatively how he could fill his monthly budget. And when he had a good month, he would set a little bit aside so that if he had a lean month, he could pull some of that in and utilize that for his budget. If we are in a situation where your expenses are more than your income, we have a problem. So there's only two sides of the equation here. You can increase your income or you can decrease your expenses. That's the only way that we are going to make this budget balance. As far as increasing your income, Colossians 3:23 and 24 says, "Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving Christ." So Pastor Dan has taught from the pulpit, we are called to work. We are called to work for him. And sometimes that work might require extra hours, might require a second job, might require a different job. But we are going to use that work as a way to generate income to fill the categories in our budget. Proverbs 30:25 says that the ants are a people not strong, yet they provide their food in the summer. So even the ants are going to be hard workers. Some things to consider. Budgets are going to be fluid. They will change as your family changes. Let's see. I think when our kids were young and we had 3 toddlers at the same time, I thought, once our kids get out of diapers, we're going to have all kinds of extra money because we're not buying diapers anymore. Obviously, that diaper money just goes right into the grocery budget, and then we're buying food. So kids are not cheap. But our budget has changed, as we've had different expenses or been in a different house, had different vehicles, had different priorities. Those budgets have changed. You have kids, you have older kids. Kids get cars and learn to drive. You have a new house. There's very dynamic. And what are each person's roles in a budget as a married couple? Each person should have equal input. So 1 Peter 3:7, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way. I don't necessarily think that candles in our house are a huge need. My wife likes to have candles in the house. So we have a little household category, not a lot in it, but that is a way for her to buy candles. I might think that a particular tool is important. She doesn't care about that tool or even know what it does. Yet, we may be able to find a way to fit that tool into our budget. So there needs to be input from both parties on what that budget is going to look like. How about the specifics of who does the details on the budget? You might have one person that loves numbers or is an accountant, and maybe both people do. Maybe neither of you love that. In our family, I'm the one that I like the numbers, so I'm the one that every month I kind of do the dirty work on making sure that all the categories are filled. I like that. It's kind of therapeutic for me. Maybe that's weird, but I kind of like that. What do you do if neither person likes that or enjoys it? I think at that point we need to think about the fact that we are called to give, we are called to support the church, we are called to be hospitable. And if you don't have a budget that lays out what your expenses are and how everything fits into that budget, you may not be able to meet the goals that we have of giving and being hospitable and taking care of our family. So it's part of our calling for stewardship to be able to make sure that we are responsible for how we manage our money. One thing that we have been able to do by having some money set aside for saving, and we'll have some categories where we're saving for something that's off in the future. And so we have a little pot of money that's there. Recently, we had a need where a family member came to us. She had a move that she had to make, and it was going to happen within a week. She needed money for her first month's rent for the deposit. We were able to shift that money aside, loan her the money, and she's working on paying it back. But because we had this budget, because we had that money in place, we were able to help her out. And even if she is not able to pay that back, as Luke 6:35 says, we need to lend expecting nothing in return. And this is a way that we can show love to that person. This is a way that we can show love to God. So even if she doesn't repay that money, we have talked about this, and that is something that we are okay, that if we never see that money back again, that's okay. We have been able to serve her. Categories. So we, like I said, we kind of like our budget. I geek out on that a little bit. I read today that the sweet spot in a budget is to have 15 to 25 categories. And so obviously I got into our budget and I counted ours. This website said that 15 to 25 is a sweet spot. Over 30 is too many. We have 52. So we have a budget that works great for us. So there is no hard number on what's going to work great, what's not going to work great. We have a lot of categories. And some of those have $0 in them because right now we're not saving for a new car, but at some point we will. But that one just that sits there and it's empty. But we have a lot of categories. We have categories, kind of a large category for auto, for charitable giving, for health care, for our house, for job expenses, leisure, and savings. And then under each of those, we have a number of subcategories. And most everything fits nicely within those. One rule that you may see as you do some research on this is the 50-30-20 rule, where 50% of your budget goes towards needs, 30% towards wants, and 20% towards saving and debt. This does not account for any giving. So that was a secular website, obviously, when we want to build in some giving into our budget. So those numbers are going to look a little bit different. One thing that we can add into our budget as we're setting up our categories are for saving, investing, and retirement. And Toby will get more into these next week. But you may have saving, you may have money that goes into a 401k or goes into another investment vehicle before you even see your paycheck. And so that may not actually be a part of your budget because you never see it. Or you may have other savings or retirement vehicles that you use that are budgeted because you are paying those after you receive your paycheck. Paying down debt we'll cover in more detail next week. There's something called a sinking fund, and Crystal and I have used these for years, although it wasn't until about a week ago that she actually knew what a sinking fund was. A sinking fund is something where you have an expense down the road. So maybe you know that in 12 months, you're gonna need a new set of tires for your car. So you go to Les Schwab, you get an estimate of $1,500, and you've got 12 months to save this $1,500, so you do the math, and that's about $125 a month. So you can create a sinking fund for your tires, where that $125 a month goes into your tire category, so that when 12 months comes and it's time to get tires for your car, it's not stressful that you have to charge $1,500 on your credit card because you have the $1,500 sitting right here that you have planned for. A sinking fund is different than an emergency fund. Sinking fund is something you know is coming. It could be a new car, it could be the tires, it could be a home repair, maybe you need a new fridge. It could be a vacation. It could be Christmas gifts. We save year-round for our Christmas gifts. We start in January saving for the next Christmas, so that when October, November, December, or February, as in Crystal's case when she starts Christmas shopping, we've got that money sitting there. She plans ahead. She likes to give gifts. An emergency is going to be something that you do not anticipate. So if a tree falls on your house, obviously that's not something that we can anticipate. That's going to be something where you might use your emergency fund, as opposed to the sinking fund where you do have that expense that you can see coming. An emergency fund, we want that to be about 3 to 6 months of expenses. And that's not necessarily 3 to 6 months worth of our budget. When it's 2019, I think, when the church was going to do a trip to Israel. And we talked to our kids, and we decided all 5 of us were going to go on this trip to Israel. But we told the kids, we're going to have to really cut our budget because we don't have the money for this trip right now. Kids were all on board, so we cut out private music lessons, we scrimped and saved on groceries, and we were able to save the money for the Israel trip. Israel trip got canceled, COVID, So we bought a boat instead. But that gets back to my 3 to 6 months of expenses for our emergency fund. If you look at your budget, there's probably a whole lot of fluff in there that doesn't necessarily need to be there. So if we have to tighten that up and really tighten our belts and only use what we absolutely need, maybe there's a job loss, maybe there's a significant health issue. If you really analyze your budget, there's a lot of money that can be pulled out of there. So we want to kind of look at, what is the bare bones of what we would need to be able to sustain our family and our budget. Look at 3 to 6 months of that, and that's about what we would want to save for our emergency fund. How about a miscellaneous category? There's never, even our 51 or 52 categories, there's no way that we can account for everything in there. There's always going to be stuff that doesn't fit nicely in there. So a miscellaneous category can be something where you put a little bit of money in there, just kind of as a catch-all. Maybe that's stamps. Maybe it's, a new boot tray because yours got blown away by a storm. I don't know what that might be. But a miscellaneous fund, it can start to get a little bit out of control if you're putting everything into it and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you have a miscellaneous category, it's something that you're going to want to keep an eye on, probably analyze that on a regular basis. And if you have a specific expense that's going into your miscellaneous category month after month after month, then that should probably fit somewhere else nicely into your budget. When Crystal and I did our first budget, I was a new firefighter. She was not working, and we figured out what our income was. We figured out what all of our expenses were, and we got to the end, and I had $15 more income than we had expenses. So we split it down the middle. We each got $7.50 a month, and that was our allowance. That was our play money for a magazine and a cup of coffee, maybe a cheap lunch. It wasn't much, but that's what we had. And that $15 brought us even in that zero-based budget where my income matched our expenses. If you have, there are some expenses where you don't know if it's going to be the same amount next month. Your mortgage is probably going to be the same. Your rent is probably going to be the same. Your car payment is probably going to be the same. But we don't always spend the same in gas every month. Maybe you travel more or less in a month. Maybe gas prices are more or less. So you might find that you put a certain amount into, say, your gas budget, and you get to the end of the month and you've got money left over there. And maybe you could take that extra, you could put it into a different category that was a little bit short. Or if you know you've got a big trip coming up the next month, you could just leave that in there and you could add to it the next month. We tend to do quite a bit of camping in the summertime. And so we spend more money on gas in the summertime than we do in the wintertime. So we will carry over money in our gas budget, knowing that in the summer we're going to spend more. There are different types of billing that you can get through. Some companies, like Avista, has what they call comfort level billing, where they'll look back at your past, 12 or 24 months, and they'll say you spend an average of $175 a month, so your bill is $175. And that might make it easier for some people to budget if they know that their gas and electric bill is going to be the same amount every single month. We're going to get more into insurance in either next week or the following week. But through the course of my work, we see a fair number of car accidents, and you would be surprised on how many people in Spokane don't carry car insurance. So liability is required. We always want to be following the rules, following the laws, making sure that we are operating legally with what we need. If you have a car loan, your bank may require that you have full coverage on that car. Once your car is paid off, you're legally not required to have that collision and comprehensive anymore. But you need to think about, as we're creating our budget, are we able to cover the cost of that car. If that's a $20,000 car and I don't have collision and it gets run off the road, am I able to cover that expense without insurance? So insurance is one where we don't want to really scrimp and cut that down bare bones because we may need it. So if we're not able to self-insure in that area, that might be something where we do need to pay a little bit more for that insurance. We were rear-ended several years ago with our van by somebody that thought they had insurance. Turns out they didn't. The damage was almost $20,000. And we did have that uninsured, underinsured rider on our policy, so that was covered. But it would have been a real hit to our budget. It would have taken a long time to recover if we had to come up with that 20 grand on our own. So insurance is something that we'll get more into in the next couple of weeks. Different ways that we can save money if we need to. If you find that your income is not able to cover all of those expenses. We want to avoid impulse shopping. You might have a rule where if you're going to spend more than $50 or $25, then you have to think about it for a couple of days, or you need to run that by your spouse. Make sure that that's actually money that you want to spend. Store brand versus name brand. We get a lot of store brand groceries, different items like that. Crystal years ago bought store brand graham crackers, and she tasted them and they were like cardboard. So we went back to, I forget what brand that was. We went back to the name brand of graham crackers because we could tell a difference. A lot of them you can't even tell the difference. How many cars do you have? Do you have 1, 2, 3 cars? Do we need to think about getting rid of a car? Do we ride the bus? Do we carpool? Do we rent a house versus getting an apartment versus buying a house? Shopping around for insurance. If we're with USAA, but if you're military or your parents were military or your grandparents were military, you can get in with USAA. That's a way that we've been able to save money on our insurance. Cable TV. The average cable TV bill is over $100 a month. We have an antenna we bought at Best Buy for $40, and we get a few channels. We get the Olympics, and we got the Super Bowl. So we got some channels. Subscriptions that we have. You've probably seen the commercials on TV for the apps that will look for all the subscriptions that you have. Amazon is, I think, $139 a year for Amazon. Spotify, gym memberships. Do you have all the car washes you can buy membership? Do you have software? Do you have mail order meal kits? Go through your expenses, your credit card statements, your bank statements, and see what those subscriptions are. If you're using them, great. If you're not using them, maybe that's a way that we can save a few dollars. Used clothing. Our kids are big thrifters. They'll go and come home with a new coat, and they'll say, look at this North Face coat. It's a $200 coat, and I got it for $8. They'll find great deals, and they actually get a lot of fun, have entertainment out of that. Generic medications, something that we can get, once the trademarks or the copyright, I forget exactly what the term is, but a certain amount of time expires on a new medication, then the other companies can come in and they can make generic medications. You might get that medication for $10 as opposed to $100. Do you pack your lunch for work or do you go out every day? Free entertainment at the library. We live in the county, but we can go to our county library. We can get tickets for cattails up on Highway 2. So there's entertainment things like that you can get for free. We could get tickets to the Civic Theater. We used to take our kids to the Mobius Museum on free tickets that we would get from the library. So there are a lot of opportunities for free entertainment where you may be able to kind of get rid of some of those higher dollar amount entertainment items that you spend and get some free entertainment instead. Our oldest son, Will, bought a $50 espresso maker on Marketplace. And he would make little espressos for himself every morning. Probably every one of those that he made himself, he was saving $5. That $5 adds up. One thing that we did when we were newly married is we wanted a gym membership. And this was a stretch for us, but the gym we wanted to go to, they had a deal where if you paid I think $500 a person up front, then you could get a gym membership for just a few dollars a month, and it would go on pretty much forever. So it was a stretch for us to scrape that money together, but we were able to do that. And it took a year or two before we broke even, but after that, we were only paying maybe $10 a month for our gym membership. And that enabled us, it was something that we enjoyed doing, and we got years of use out of that gym membership. So we're gonna look here at a couple of sample budgets. Is that slide not in here, Toby? Okay. In the growth guide, what page is that on? Page 17. And I don't think I have a copy of it here. So there are 3 sample budgets here. And one thing that we want to make sure that we're not doing is jumping to conclusions on why some of these categories are what they are. So we look at family number 1, and we think, what are their priorities? Well, giving sure isn't a priority. They give $50. And each of these add up to about $6,000 for the families. So family number 1 gives $50. Vacation isn't a priority. They don't put any money into vacation. But they put $1,200 into entertainment. They have over $1,200 in car payments. So what do we think? Are they just out to show what great cars they can have and spend all the money that they want to on their entertainment? Or do they have a big family? Do they drive all their neighbor kids to church? Is that why they've got big car payments? There might be reasons that we can't see on why these families are spending these big chunks of money on what they are. We look at family number 2. They spend $1,500 on groceries, over $1,500 on dining out. Are they feeding all their kids as friends? Are they hosting youth group every week? Are they treating church friends to lunch every week? There might be a reason why they spend that much money on dining out. Family number 3 has got a big house, over $3,000 a month on their house. Do they have foster kids? They spend $1,000 a month on vacation. Do they have unsaved family members that live out of town that they go and see? So we need to we don't want to be jumping to conclusions on these budgets and think, oh, they're wasting money here, they're wasting money here. Maybe it's different than how we would do it, but there might be a good reason why they are spending the money that they are. So each of you guys' budgets is going to look different than mine. It's going to look different than the other people at your table and the people sitting next to you at the next table. But we need to make sure that our budget is glorifying God and that we are using our resources to glorify Him. Toby's going to come up for just a minute here, and then we're going to have our next discussion group.
Thank you, Paul. Well, I know what all of you are thinking. Toby's a liar. I said that Paul and I were the least interesting presenters that you could find, but clearly I should not have included Paul in that. So I thought you did a great job, so thank you, Paul. I actually just wanted to touch base on a couple things related to budgets. I didn't want Paul to have all the fun when it came to the riveting, exciting topic of budgets. So I just wanted to talk through a couple kind of historic things that were specific to Jen and I that I thought might be helpful or interesting for you as it relates to budgeting and how you kind of manage a household. So one of the first things I wanted to mention is there were times where our budget was really, really, really tight. And so one of the ways that we were able to try to manage those categories that Paul talked about was by using cash. So we used the envelope system, not for every category. We didn't pay cash for like our mortgage or some of those things, but the way that we really used it is we figured out which of the categories we were most likely to struggle to stay within. That's usually like entertainment, dining, groceries. And so we took those categories and we would set our budgeted amounts, and then we would pull cash out each paycheck. Jen would carry around most of the cash because she did most of the shopping. I would carry around a small amount of cash for, I can't even remember why I would have cash. And then we would use the cash for those purchases. The way that was really helpful was because when the cash is gone, you have to stop spending. So if there are categories where you struggle to stay within your budget, using cash is a great way to do that. A great example, and it really helps you stick to your budget. If you build a budget and don't stick to it, it's really a worthless exercise. So it's really important that you stick to it. We worked really hard to do that. One example is we went to the store as a family at one point. We had a couple of little girls. I was getting new pants for work. I hate getting new pants. I hate trying them on. I hate shopping for clothes. I don't know if any other guys feel that, but so it was a painful, horrible process to pick out these new pants. We got them, got up to the cash register, went to check out. Jen opened the envelope. She had forgotten that she had made a couple other purchases for the girls for clothing, so we didn't have any cash in our clothing envelope. And unfortunately, we didn't have enough in any of our other categories to cover. So we had to put the pants back and walk away from the store and go home. And so that was just an example of where we had really established as a family that we wanted to stick to our budget. And even if it meant having to reenact that horrible exercise of trying on and getting new pants, we were willing to do that in order to stick with our budget. So that was just one of the things I wanted to mention, is that cash can be helpful, and it can help you stick to a budget, and you really should commit to that. One of the other things I wanted to mention is we found it really important, and it was something that we felt strongly about as we were raising our kids, that we were trying to involve them and make sure that they understood stewardship and that they had visibility into what was going on with us and our finances. We didn't let them make spending decisions. That's not very wise, but we wanted to make sure that they understood kind of our philosophy and how we did that. So a couple of the things that we did, one exercise that we found to be useful, and our girls still remember it, is at one point we took Monopoly money and we took the amount that I received in one paycheck and we brought that out in Monopoly money, and we sat down with our girls and we said, okay, this is how much Dad makes. And then we set aside, okay, here's how much go to taxes. Here's how much go for our house so that we have somewhere to live. Here's what goes for our food that we eat. Here's how much goes for your school. And so we kind of walk through and let them visually see all of the expenses that we had. And so that was, I think, a great way, and they still remember it because it was helpful for them to see all the different ways and where all the money goes. So that was helpful. The other thing that we really worked with them on is to understand that money is finite. I think a lot of kids just think there's endless amounts of money and it never runs out. So we really tried to use opportunities with our girls to help them understand what opportunity cost meant, which opportunity cost is if you make a decision and you decide to spend money here, that means that there are other things that you won't be able to do because you spent the money here. Those may be conscious choices that you make, but it also might be something may come up that you didn't expect or didn't know was going to become available, and you can't do it because you made this decision over here. So one of the ways that we would do that is, for example, when we would be driving home from church and they would say, hey, can we stop and get and eat out and get lunch after church? We would say, if we want to do that, that means that we're not going to be able to go get, we're not going to be able to go get milkshakes after your basketball game later in the week. So just helping them understand that if we make this choice now, it means that we may have to give up something later. And that was something that I think was really helpful for them to see and to understand. So those were just a few ways that we really worked to try to instill an understanding of finances and an understanding of stewardship with our kids. Hopefully it stuck, but I know they still remember a lot of those instances. A couple other things I just wanted to mention quickly about budgeting is, Paul mentioned variable paychecks. Not everybody's check is exactly the same every time. So we always encourage people with variable paychecks, budget on the lowest amount that it might be. So be very conservative and budget on that lowest amount. and then prioritize where any additional funds above that will go. So if you're the minimum that you normally get in a paycheck is $1,000, budget on $1,000 if that's the lowest that it normally is. And then if you get $1,500, have prioritized where is that extra money going to go? What are the categories that we want to add to, or what other things do we want to do with that money if it shows up? So that's a great way to do it. The other thing that we always tried to do, and Jen did a phenomenal job of this, was she always looked out 4 to 6 months to see what was coming as we did our budgets. So we budgeted on a monthly basis based on when I received my paychecks. But she was always looking out 4 to 6 months to see what was coming, because not every month is the same. Some months we would have a pile of athletic fees for school because they were starting spring sports, or tabs were gonna come due on all the vehicles, and so that was gonna come. So she always did a really good job of looking out and trying to make sure that we tailored our budget based on the things that were gonna be coming. You can't foresee everything, but if you do a diligent job of looking out in front of you, you can typically adjust and recognize some of those things that are gonna happen. So that's something I would encourage, is don't just budget like this is what's going on this month. Make sure that you're looking out and planning for those things that you know are gonna be coming. So just a couple things I wanted to note. Last thing I wanted to say before we jump into our last discussion session is in your book, there's a QR code that will take you to an example budget. It's just a simple spreadsheet. Jen and I have never, even though I'm a cybersecurity guy, we've never gotten super technical with our budgets. We just use a spreadsheet, just a simple spreadsheet. And so if you use that QR code, it will take you to just a sample budget Excel spreadsheet. You can see the different categories that are in there. There's some recommended percentages that are in there to try to help. So it's just hopefully a simple first step start. If you haven't done a budget before, it'll at least give you kind of a framework to work from. Again, you may have categories that you need to add. A lot of those categories in there probably aren't relevant to you, but it's at least somewhere to start. So, and if you have questions on budgets, feel free to reach out to Paul or Crystal or Jenny or I. I think we have, yeah, I'll put up this slide at the end. Our personal phone numbers are there. If you have some urgent or you feel like you need to have a deeper discussion on any of these topics, you can feel free to reach out to us. Obviously, you can text questions in and we'll answer those at that last session. But if there's something deeper or you need to have a longer conversation, feel free to reach out to us. So with that, we'll send you into our last discussion group, give you a few minutes to talk through these questions. So the first one is, what makes a budget glorifying to God? I think hopefully you saw in Paul's examples that there are different reasons why different families have priorities, and every family's budget is gonna look different, and there can be really good reasons why you have priorities. But a budget is the way that you make your priorities show up in your life. So what does that mean to you? What is a budget glorifying God? What does that look like? Do you believe that your current budget is an accurate reflection of your desire to glorify God? So I would just be honest and transparent and think through, is your budget, or if you don't have a budget, is the way that you spend your money, do you think that's really a reflection of the desire that you have to glorify God? And then what are the roadblocks that you have in establishing or using a budget consistently? So what gets in the way? If you don't have a budget, what keeps you from having one? If you don't follow a budget well, what are the things that keep you from following a budget well? So go ahead and talk at your tables about this, and then here in a few minutes, we'll go ahead and close things out. All right, I'm gonna wrap things up. You are welcome to keep talking at your tables for a little bit if you would like, but I do wanna make sure we're cognizant of those who may have kids to pick up or other things to do. So we'll go ahead and close out now. Just wanted to reemphasize the reason that this session is stewardship and budgeting is those are really the fundamental aspects of being able to manage resources. If you have a good biblical perspective of stewardship and your heart's desire is to honor God with your resources, then the budget will help give you a practical way to do that, where you plan out, map out what you're gonna do with those resources in order to make it reflect God's glory and your appreciation and your diligence to that. So this kind of sets the foundation. 30 minutes to talk about budgets is not enough. So you can see on the screen now the Petersons and our personal phone numbers. If you want to talk in more detail about any of these things, feel free to give us a call. I mean, Paul mentioned he loves these things. Jen and I are the same way. I think all four of us geek out on this stuff. We love spreadsheets and formulas and numbers. So we would be happy to talk through and work through these things in more detail. Get together and have dessert and do all the fun things. So feel free to reach out to us. But we just wanted to encourage you all in that area that, again, it's never too late to be a good steward, whether you're early in life, late in life, have a lot or have a little. We can always do better and just mature the way that we manage our resources for God's glory.